This video is to explain the messaging, email, and meeting systems of the In Loco Parentis software. All users have access to the messaging tab on the left-hand side, but before you can actually use it, you need to set up some preferences. Within the preferences is a tab called Messaging Rules, and we're going to set up some messaging rules. So if I press the plus button, I will add new rules, and I can set a title for the rule. So my first rule is going to be to allow students to message system administrators. So I'm going to set up a student to system administrators rule. And on the senders tab here, I can click and I can say who can send. So I could add students here. There are a lot of options here, and if I pan down a little bit, you can see that I can have student statuses. I can also have student tags and all sorts of things like that. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to make this available to current students. If I press the add button here, then it appears here. So the roles of the sender is student with status current. And the recipients are going to be sysadmins and admins. So if I add those two categories here, they're here. And the messaging settings, this allows me to set what fields, how much of the person I'm sending to, how much of the person's data is visible to the sender. So in this case, I'm going to let them see the full name, I'm going to let them see a picture, and I'm going to let them see the job title of the person they're sending to. Now, before I save this rule, I'm just going to switch to a second display here. So this system is set up as another administrator who is actually viewing as one of the students. And if I went to the student and I pressed plus to create a new message and clicked on participants, you can see it says no options. There is nobody that this student can write to. So whilst the tab is there, it is dysfunctional until you have defined messaging rules. And similarly, if I look in the directory, there is nobody in the directory of this student. So if I go back to the original user and I save the rule, on the right-hand side, you'll see the new people being visible to the student. So on the right-hand side now, we can see that there are 4 administrators, system administrators, and 1 administrator. And just to prove a point, if I remove the admins from here, then I can, you will see that Josh Somerville disappears. And rules can either be generic or they can be specific. So I can either have it like these, where I'm just saying, you know, all admins and all sysadmins, or I can actually put individuals' names in here. So if I wanted to specifically enable a particular person to speak to a particular other person, then I could add them as individuals here as well, but that's not what I'm doing here. So equally, I've said that they can see the picture. If I drop out the picture option and save that, then the picture will be disabled here, but we'll leave that in for now. Okay, so that's a sort of basic messaging rule. If, as David Wang on the right-hand side now, I try and send a message, I can either simply send a message by clicking on the send message icon on the right-hand side, or I can go to the messages, and in this case, that's what I'll do. So in this case, I'm going to create a new message. I'm just going to say hi as the title, and the details are I'm homesick. And I'm going to send that to myself. I'm logged in as myself on this system. And as soon as I send that message here, I will get a blue box at the top, which tells me that a message has arrived. If I had notifications enabled on Chrome, then I would get a notification. Notifications are enabled with this little padlock on Chrome on the left-hand side, and I can get notifications, and I can enable them or disable them here. And if I had the app, I would get a message on my app, which would tell me that I had a new message, and I can follow that notification, and that would open up the messaging page on the software. Here, if I click on Open Messages, I will go to the Messages tab, and on the left-hand side, on Messages, you can see a small 1 next to the Messages, which tells me that I've got one message. Now, if I look again on David's page, at the moment I haven't read the message because I can see that the message has arrived, I can see the subject, but I haven't on the left-hand side actually opened the message. And so the name here is in dark grey, which means hasn't read the message. And so if I open that message, it says read. There's a red icon here to show me that it's an unread message. As I open that message, then immediately it flags on David's screen and it goes to pale grey to show that I've read the message. In the case of system administrators, you only need to set up the rule in one direction, so from the student to the system administrator. The system administrator is always able to reply, and indeed anybody who receives a message can reply. What they can't do is start new messages. So the student to sysadmin allows me to initiate a message from the student to the sysadmin, and I don't need, in the particular case of a system administrator, to have the reverse one, but you'll see the need for that later on. Okay, so let's reply to his message, and in a concerned manner, I'm going to say, don't worry. Again, on the right-hand side, David is already logged in on this page, so he won't get the blue banner, but he will get the message, and it's instantaneously there. And in the manner of a normal messaging system, your own messages are aligned to the right-hand side, and other people's messages are aligned to the left-hand side. So that's the basic message system. I'm going to set up another rule now, a slightly more complicated rule, and see if we can get our homestays talking to our parents. Now, in this particular case, this is not a rule that every agency might think is a good idea. So I'm going to create a new rule, and the rule is going to be homestay talking to parent. And I could, if I click here, I could add team member, because obviously homestays are members of the team. But if I go down a little bit further, I can be specific about the type of team member I want to allow to create this message. So I'm going to add homestay, and then in the recipients, I'm going to have, again, it could add team member because they are team members, but that would allow any team member to message any other team member, whereas this is just allowing a team member. So I'm going to add mother and father in here as a homestay. So the homestay is able to talk to the mother and father, and they can see the full name again. They can see a picture if one has been created. The parents, I don't think we need to show their job title. Now, this is a slightly dangerous rule to have, your parents and your homestays talking to each other. So I'm going to be quite paranoid about this, and I am going to copy myself into all messages of this type. And in fact, I'm sufficiently worried about this particular communication channel that I am going to require all messages of this type to be authorized. So I am not only on the channel, I'm going to see all the messages, but then I'm also going to require authorization as well. And I'm going to save that message. So we've set up a homestay to the parent. So if I, on the right-hand side, exit, I'm viewing as David. And if I go to the homestays and I view as Pippa, who is a homestay, I will now be able to see in the directory, I see 3 people. I see Jay Wong, Jennifer Lee, and Jilu Wong. And let's just understand why that is the case. On the left-hand side, if I look at Pippa Radford's record here, I can see that she is responsible for 3 students. And if I go to David Wang's student record, I can see that on David Wang's team, Pippa and John Radford are host family, Jilu Wong and Jay Wong are mother and father of David, and there are some various other people. And what's happening on the right-hand side is it is picking up Jay Wong and Jilu Wong from David's record. So it's not that this homestay can message any parent. They can only message parents that are associated with students that they have in common. And there must be a similar relationship for Jennifer Lee. And so I can see these three parents. So I'm now going to message Jilu Wong as this homestay. So I am going to send a message to Jilu Wong. And Jilu Wong immediately comes up as unreachable. And what that means is that the software knows that Jilu Wong has never logged into the system. The Jilu Wong, if I look at Jilu Wong's account for a second here, then I can see that she hasn't even got a login name. So it knows that she can't log into the system, and therefore it's saying that she is technically unreachable. However, she has got a primary email address, and so the system could access or at least send a message to Jilu Wong if it was allowed to send messages to her emails. And so there is an option on Jilu Wong's account. As an administrator, I see this option on the contact tab of their account, and it's called Email Messages OK. And if I save that, then on the right-hand side, this now goes to a dark grey, showing me that Jilu is accessible but hasn't read the message. If a user gets an email, then it is possible for them to opt out of further email messages. And when we see the email system in a second, you will see that there is an unsubscribe option at the bottom. And this email messages OK is on the profile page of every user. So email messages OK can be set on their profile, which means all users have access to it because all users have access to their profile page. So let's go back to the messaging, and we now know that Jilu can be reached, but of course they can only be reached via email. So let's just send a test message, and we need to send some details. And we're going to send this message. And what will happen is, because Jilu Wong has never logged into the system, there is no way she won't get notifications because she hasn't been on the system. She isn't on the app because she isn't on the system, and she's not going to get this message. So if I send this message, the system will realize that that has no way of accessing it. First of all, it's saying on, this is my account on the left-hand side, it's saying that there are pending message entries. So we set it up that not only were we going to get copied in, and here you can see I've been copied into this message. So if I open this message up, I can see that I'm a BCC member, and that it's gone from Jilu Wong to Pippa Radford, who is also unreachable as it happens. But in this case, that's not an issue because it's Pippa actually sending the message to Jilu. And I can see there are pending message entries, and there's a button up here to tell me that. And on this, I can release this message. If I needed to modify the message, then I have edit rights here as well. So BCC people have a lot of power on the system, and they can edit messages and correct spelling mistakes, or block messages, and in fact delete messages as well. So in this particular case, I'm happy with that, and maybe I should just edit it. Hello and welcome, because what I'm going to do on this, because I'm a system administrator on this, I also have permission. Jilu Wong and Pippa Radford could also do this, but only for languages that they speak. But I could add a Chinese translation of this message. And in fact, I can either add the Chinese manually if I click on the left-hand side of this drop-down, or if I click on this button to the right, then it will attempt to translate that into Mandarin. And so this now I've actually modified the message and I've added a translation as well. And I'm going to save that. And I'm finally going to release that message as well. So if I release that message, what the system now knows is that that message can now be sent, but it hasn't been sent because at the moment we haven't actually released it. So if I go up to this top right-hand corner and I press send, then it will now finally send an email to Jilu from Pippa. And if I go up here, we've actually got Jilu's mailbox here. And if I look in spam, it is likely that Gmail has flagged this as spam. If I click on this message and I report it as not spam, then it will go to the email box. Again, if I go back to the right-hand side, at the moment, this message hasn't been opened. Normally, if a message isn't marked as spam on Gmail, then the message will immediately be flagged as received once Gmail gets it. But in this case, because it went via spam, it hasn't been opened. If you're using Outlook, then this will work as well. The system tries to track even external emails, tries to track when external emails are read, irrespective of any other settings. And if I open this message on the right-hand side, you will see Jilu Wong's message that will go into a light grey. So if I click here, this now becomes light grey. So this is what a message looks like when it's received by email. It has a sequence number, in this case number 1. It tells you who it came from, it tells you the date it was sent. If there are multiple languages, the languages are all there. Each message entry is separated by a line, and it tells you where it came from. And the button at the bottom that I can see here is stop all emails. That will basically reset the email messages OK for Jilu Wong. But we won't do that. What we're going to do is reply. There is another box up here called which says latest, and unfortunately on Gmail, because Gmail caches images, that isn't going to work on Gmail. That will always say latest. Gmail do this because they don't want people to have messages that then have images that disappear. Unfortunately, if it's not dynamic, then that flag won't be correct, and this will always say that it's the latest email. But if you're using something like Outlook as your email client, or any of the other dynamic email clients, then up here it will tell you whether this is the latest part of this message. So it also, within the email clients, most of them except Gmail, it will tell you whether they are the latest. Anyway, we can reply to this, and we're just going to say thank you, and we're going to send that message. Now, we've got an email server built into our software, and Gmail is now negotiating with our email server, and at some point in the future, the message will come through on the right-hand side, and here it is. So here it says, this is message sequence number 2. It's a message from Jilu at 11:41, who replied by email, and she said thank you. And so on and so forth. The messages are automatically updated. So if I brought in another person into this message, say for example David, who is the student, then it would update him as necessary, and in that case by email. The reason I can't type David in here is because Pippa has no access to David's mail account, so I would have to add a rule for that, which I'm not going to do. That's the basic messaging system, and that's also the external email system. The actual format and the layout of the emails can't be changed a great deal, but it can be changed to some extent, and we can configure that at the back end if you want to have particular formats for your emails. I'm going to go back and set up one more messaging rule, and this is a slightly less controversial messaging rule, but in potentially a more dangerous messaging rule even still. There are situations where you want students to be able to talk to taxi drivers, and child protection says that giving out personal telephone numbers of students to taxi drivers or vice versa, so in other words, communicating by text message or WhatsApp, is not the best way to do it. And so this system allows you to set up messaging rules between students and taxi drivers and the other way around. So I'm going to create a new rule, which is student to taxi driver. This is one of those rules that I would definitely want to have a BCC on. So I'm going to set a BCC here, and so this is to taxi staff. And so I'm going to, I don't want them to see the full name. I only want them to see the picture and the first name. And I'm definitely going to BCC myself in on this. I could BCC any of the sysadministrators, but let's BCC. I'm going to authorize, I would normally set that on. In this particular case, I'm going to leave that turned off. Now, because this is reasonably controversial, students messaging taxi drivers, certainly as far as child protection goes, within the settings page, there is a new setting which is limit taxi driver student messages around the trip, and it's defaulted to 2 hours. And what that means is that students and taxi drivers can message each other up to 2 hours before a trip and up to 2 hours after a trip. And the reason we're doing it 2 hours after a trip is because of a situation where a taxi driver is asked to stay at the airport until the student has confirmed that they've actually managed to get on the flight and that everything is fine and that they are leaving the country. So you can set that to whatever you need to. Now, obviously, if I now log in, go back on the right-hand side and log in as the student again, so I'm going back to students and I'm going to log in as if I was David. And I'm going to look at his directory. He has no taxi drivers here, and the reason for that is because he's got no upcoming taxi events that would give him permission to message a taxi driver. So the taxi drivers don't even appear in the directory unless it is within 2 hours of the trip. It's a bit complicated to demonstrate this, but I will endeavor to have a go. If I go to the timelines and I set up for David's timeline, so I'm going to edit David's timeline, and I'm going to create a new taxi journey. So I'm going to create a taxi journey, and I'm going to set this as 11:46 will be fine. And I'm going to, for a 2-minute taxi journey. And the meeting point is the student's house at school, and we're going to take them to Heathrow Terminal 5. And we're going to book that. We're going to pick a taxi company. So this is Club Class Cars and Eleanor Stajowski, and we're going to save that. We could set a reminder here as well. The details of transport links are elsewhere, but we could remind the student 20 minutes before. their journey is due to take place. And we've got some other information. We could put meeting point notes in and so forth. Now, this is the current time, and therefore this taxi driver will now appear to David on the right-hand side. So the taxi driver is now accessible and messages could be sent. And again, if a message was sent to the taxi driver, then I would get copied into it and I could see what was going on. I probably don't need to authorize it unless I'm very paranoid, because it's actually quite useful for those messages to go through real time. Again, if the taxi journey was at a different time, then Eleanor would no longer be accessible. So that's a specific rule for taxi drivers, and the BCC rules as well. So what we're going to look at now is group messaging. There is a group system within the software where you can define as many groups as you need, and I've defined a group called All Students. On the All Students, I haven't actually got all the students here, but I've got some students. The All Students, I can send a message to all students. So if I go to messages here, and David is one of those students, and I create a new message, only system administrators and administrators can create group emails. And so if I send this to the group called All Student, probably should be saying All Students with an S, change the name of the group, just being picky. The messages now will have been updated and it should say All Students, it does. I am going to send a message, and it's going to say, the message is about, let's say it's about the camping trip. I'm going to send a message, and it's going to say, here is a useful checklist. And I'm actually going to add an attachment to this. And I'm going to add an image here. And so I've now sent an attachment with the message, and I'm going to send that message. And on the right-hand side, you can see that David has got a new message. Again, it would show up in the app or as a notification and so forth. And I can open the messaging page, and he gets a message saying camping trip. If he looks at that message, he sees the details, and so here's a useful checklist. He can click on the image and get the data, and he could reply to this. Now, David is a very well-meaning, organized student, and he knows that it's going to be raining when the camping trip is coming up. If he replies to this message as it stands, then all the students on the All Students group will get his reply. And that may or may not be a good thing. You need to decide whether that is what you want to happen. It may be that David was less organized and just says what camping trip or something, and that would maybe not be a good thing for the others to see. And so you need to decide whether this, how this should work. So on the basis of the fact that I'm not keen on the other students seeing what David has replied, I am going to create a new rule. So I'm going to create a new messaging rule, which is a student-to-student messaging rule. Now, there is no student-to-student messaging access. This system is not designed as a chat function, so student to student will not create any messaging between students. But rather what this does, this is actually to define what happens when students message back on group emails. So if I go back here, I'm going to set this for all students, and I'm going to set it for all students as recipients as well. So this is a student-to-student email. And on the messaging setting, I am going to set it as authorization required. So I'm going to copy myself in. I'm going to set it as authorization required, and I'm going to save that as a new rule. I need to say who is visible, so it doesn't really matter in this case. So if I went to the directory for David, he doesn't see all the other students. However, if he now replies to this message, at the moment this message looks like this. Here's the camping trip message. And there is nobody BCC'd on this message. There's nobody who is copied into this message. But if I reply as David on the right-hand side and saying, isn't it going to be wet? Shouldn't we pack waterproofs or something? And I send that message. Just for good measure, I'm going to add another language for that. David is going to add the Chinese version of that as well. So he's put it in English and Chinese. He's extremely well organized. And I'm going to save that. And on the right-hand side, it realized, because of the messaging rule, that I wouldn't see this reply unless I was also not only in the participants, but also on the BCC list. So it's added me as on the BCC list. And therefore, I can see this message. If, however, I was one of the other students on the trip, I wouldn't see this message because it's marked as pending and it hasn't been authorized for a release. If I release that message, then everybody on the trip will see that message. And in this case, that's a particularly good idea. And I could reply and say, yes, that's a very good idea. Please also pack waterproofs. So the system is quite intelligent about how it releases messages. Just out of interest, I'm also going to reply here and I'm going to add so I'm going to add that. I'm going to release this message to all, so that is no longer a pending message. And I'm going to add the Chinese translation for that here. Now, if there are no other translations, then it will just pick English. English is always added. But if I look at the student record for David here, so here's David's student record, and I look on his general page, his first language is marked as Chinese. His second language is English and French and so forth. So when I send this message, because it has a Chinese translation, when I send that message, as a default, David will get that message in Chinese. He can switch to one of the other translations if he so wants to, but his default view will be the Chinese because that is flagged as his main language. If I switched his language to English, then his default view would be the English, and that's probably a good idea if he's here to learn English. Okay, so that's group messaging with some extra bells and whistles. And that's the general editing features. So messaging rules have to be done in two directions. If you want people to get the rules in both directions, you need to set up both, for example, homestay to parent and parent to homestay, which I haven't done. Default rules, if you press this button up here, we have created what we think are some default rules, which you should probably have. So this is allowing all members of the community to contact sysadmins and sysadmins to contact members of the community. We also have sysadmin to sysadmin, and we also have sysadmin to student as well, just for completeness. So those are the default rules. If you add those, then that's a pretty good basic setup. If you delete any of those, then the add default rules will just add the ones that are missing. So it will just add the bits that it thinks are missing. And those are reasonably sensibly set up. Finally, there may be messages. For example, if we go here, it may be that a message, for example, from a homestay to a parent is quite important, and perhaps not in this case with just the welcome thing, but perhaps we need a way of adding this message. It could be an important piece of information about the student that the parent has divulged to somebody, a homestay or an administrator, and we may need to, it would be quite useful to have that on the students page. So if you go to the preferences option here and on the settings here, then if you go down, then here there is an option, show messages with journals. And if you enable this, then it will link the message system to the journals for the student. So if I save that option, if I now go back to messages, an extra field has appeared, referred students, and if I add David in here, it could be one or more students, then if I save that message, if I now go back to the students record and look at David, then in the journal entries, the messages are here as well. So here is the message, and that message is now also added alongside all the standard journal entries. So that's quite a useful thing. It certainly keeps the journal up to date with regard to messages, even if those messages don't actually involve the student. So if a message from a parent came in to an administrator, then you can effectively add a file note to the student rather than having to look through the messaging system as well. So the next piece of the email system is where an external user wants to email someone inside the system. And so to do that, you need to define a postmaster. So if you go to Preferences and Settings, you need to set a postmaster in the postmaster field on the General tab here. So I've set myself as a postmaster. And if we get an external email coming to an internal user, it is going to get copied to the postmaster, and indeed all external emails are both copied to the postmaster and set as pending. In other words, none of the messaging rules apply. It will attempt to interpret the external address, but this is not a system which is designed for taking random emails externally. However, it can be done. If I look on the students page and I look at David Wang and I look at his contact details, then he has an internal email address which is dwong1@demo.devinlocoparentis.org. So that is his internal email address as far as the system is concerned. If we take his mother's email and we compose a new email and we send it to dwong1 at this address, and we say the subject is incoming emails and incoming info. If we send this email, what happens is, as I press the button here, our email server talks to Gmail again and picks that up. It won't appear on David's email straight away, on David's messaging straight away, but rather it will appear on the postmaster's account. So I have now got a new message because I am the postmaster, and if I go here, I can see that there is an incoming message called incoming emails, and it is blocked. It is waiting for authorization. So here is the information that has come externally, and it has correctly identified that this is being sent by Jilu Wong, who is in the system, to David, who is in the system, and it's waiting for authorization. If I release this, it will go through, and I can send it. It will then be released to David. And I'm releasing the whole message, and it has come through to David, and on the right hand side you can see that has come through as a message. Of course, if David is to reply to this message, the message has been created if David replies. So in fact, this won't go out of the system because every single message has to be authorized. Because this is external emails, then this is going to have to be authorized. So if I authorize this message, it will go out, and eventually Jilu will get a message in Gmail, possibly in spam again. And so there's the message that's coming through. The other more likely situation is that an incoming email is somebody gets hold of your email address and tries to spam you, or you have an email address that you've given out to one person and then another person has used it. So to simulate that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove Jilu's email from the system. So I'm going to edit in the community. I'm going to edit Jilu's email address. I'm actually going to delete her email address. So if I remove her email address here and save that record, so now it looks as if Jilu doesn't have any way of being contacted, and in fact on the right hand side you can see that Jilu is now uncontactable. And if I send a message from Jilu to anyone in this system, and an unknown participant, so I'm going to compose a message to let's say Fred at demo.devonlocoparentis.org, and hi, do you do guardianship or something? And if I send that message, obviously this person does not exist on the system, and the email I'm sending it from, which is Jilu's message, Jilu's email, it doesn't exist on the system as well. So that message has been sent. Our email server will pick up that message, and that message will come through to the postmaster eventually. It doesn't understand, and so here is the message. And when I look at this message, it has me as a participant because I'm the postmaster, but it has no way of understanding it. So, do you do guardianship? It was received via email from an unknown recipient, and it was sent to Fred at demo@locoparentis.org. So this is where it's come from, Jilu Wong, and we've removed that, so she is now an unknown, and it's come through to there. And I could redirect that. I could remove myself as a participant and pass it on to someone, and therefore they could then get this as an inquiry and deal with it. Finally, on the email system, it may be that you have a sequence of emails that you have had are external to our system. So, for example, you might be messaging backwards and forwards from your regular email address to a parent. But when it comes to the end of that messaging sequence, you would like that messaging sequence to be associated with the student's account, but you don't want to cut and paste or copy huge or create huge JPEGs or anything like that. You want to basically get that information into the system. And this is also useful when you have a postmaster. So from your external email address, you can then message yourself internally on this system. And when that message comes through to the postmaster will be then able to add a referred student and add that message sequence, which will all be visible here, to the student's account. So you can use it as a sort of filing system so that external email trails can be added to student accounts. So the final part of this video is for the messaging meeting system. I've cleared off all the messages here, and I'm just going to create a single message. I'm logged in as this system as John Connor, and I'm going to invite my colleague to join us, and he is actually logged in as me. So the subject is meeting, and we're going to send a message, and I'm going to send that message. if I press on the telephone button here, it shows John Connor as meeting, and if I join that meeting myself, then it shows up. And if I enable my camera, I can enable my camera and microphone, and we can have a meeting. And I could share my screen if I wanted to, or hang up the call. So I will hang up the call, and that would be quite useful if you had both technical support to be able to do, and indeed if you wanted to do a tutorial. For a tutorial, you could actually switch who shares the screen in the middle of the meeting. So the tutor could show his exemplary solution to a question, and the student could show what they're working on. And this will work with phones as well, and meetings between various browsers as well. So the meeting system is built into the software as well now, useful for technical support as well. And that's the end of this video. If there are any questions or any features that you think we should add, please give us a call.